reached that age where they were very, very frail. And my father died at 93, and he thought if he never got off the treadmill, if he never stopped hiking, he would never die. Because he was an athlete, and he was a health food nut, and he drank apple cider vinegar and water, and he ate so much kale, it was coming out of his ears, and he was absolutely way ahead of his time. I mean, this was a person born in 1911. My mother died at 101, and appeared to have lost her memory, but actually she heard absolutely everything we said in her room. And to give you an example, one time I was in their apartment on Central Park West looking at the park, and my mother didn't say a word, so I would get in bed and hold her, because I think people never stop needing touch. Touch is life. And she wouldn't talk, and for the most brilliant woman, for a woman who just was a painter and wrote the most incredible poetry and was brilliant, and a chess player and a Scrabble player. I hate games, but she won all the time. She wouldn't make a word if it wasn't a 7-letter word. That was my mother. So competitive and brilliant. And suddenly she wasn't speaking, so I'd get in bed and hold her. And then towards the end of my visit, I'd say, Mom, I have to go, I have to meet Ken for dinner. And I didn't want to leave her, because I was always afraid she'd die. And I wouldn't be there, and I was obsessed with being there when she died. I don't understand this, but I didn't want her to die alone, okay? And I remember getting up, getting out of the bed, saying goodbye to her caregiver, walking to the door, and then I'd put on my jacket and I'd say, Mom, I love you, and silence, and then she'd get up out of the bed and she'd say, I love you more! So obviously she heard absolutely everything. She just wasn't talking. Okay, so that was the end of their lives. Then my daughter went into recovery at the age of 19 and she went to Hazelden, and she became so fucking sober that she saved the lives of so many young women who became her pigeons. And she said to me the other day, Mom, I am not going to tell anyone anymore that I've been sober for 19 years because they're going to think I'm old. So I said, well, let's make up a number that might not make. She said, I just turned 37, my life is over, and I now am going to say that my sobriety date is 6 years ago. And she said, I shouldn't be telling all these people how old I am. I said, Molly, you're crazy. 40 for women is the prime of life. 50 is the prime of life. 60 is the prime of life. It only gets bad when you're 85. When your memory unravels a bit. And some people don't, by the way. Some people just, if you do a lot of yoga and you don't besot yourself with too much alcohol, you can go on until 95 being crystal clear. It's in the genes. It's in the way you take care of yourself. And Molly doesn't know that because she's 37. So I say to her, listen, did you ever read The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie? I said, read it. You're in your prime. You'll never be as much in your prime as you are. Oh, Mommy, what do you know? Basically. Okay. So that happened. My husband nearly died of an aneurysm of the aorta. And although he's not older than me, we're born on the same day, 1 year apart. He's 1 year older than me, March 26th. We're both Aries, which is supposed to be doomed. And it is true that we fight like cats and dogs. But I think that's great, and it's very healthy. And if you fight with your partner, you don't save up the resentments. and it works. And we've been married for 26 years. This is my 4th marriage and his 4th marriage. And, you know, whenever I say to him, I'm so mad I'm going, and he says, you're not going anywhere, haha. You would never go anywhere. You and I were absolutely beshert in the heavens. So forget it. You're not, and he laughs. He's not threatened. Which is fun. Anyway, so I'm going to read you a little bit of this book. So this is a book about what happens to you when you start to believe that you really are going to die. And one of the reasons that I sent it to Woody Allen, who is a friend and a relative of my husband, distant, is because Woody Allen is the man who said, I'm not afraid of death, I just don't want to be there when it happens. So I thought he had to get the book to blurb it. And immediately his assistant writes me back and says, Woody never blurbs books.
There it is.
And it says, how Erica Jong is able to deal with all these sensitive issues and still make the book funny is amazing. I loved reading it. Now, I can tell you something about Woody. When his parents were in their 90s, or almost 100, he had a camera in his townhouse so he could watch the caregivers. And his parents both lived to almost 100. So I think he must have identified with this book. His parents are gone, as are mine, but he had a camera like a baby camera, an infant camera. So from his apartment on 5th Avenue to his parents' apartment on Park Avenue, he could see what the caregivers were doing and make sure they weren't abusing his parents. I've never seen anything like that. So you assume he must have cared about that a lot, or you wouldn't do that. Okay. So I finally wrote to him and I said, remember your line, I'm not afraid of death, I just don't want to be there when it happens. I wrote it on a little handwritten card. You really need to read this book. If you don't want to blurb it, it's fine, but you got to read it. And then I got a blurb for him, which is astonishing, because he never does that. Okay. So the epigraph from this book, I'm going to read you a small bit of it. It's not my words. Days pass, and the years vanish, and we walk sightless among miracles. Lord, fill our eyes with seeing, and our minds with knowing. Let there be moments when your presence, like lightning, illumines the darkness in which we walk. Help us to see, wherever we gaze, that the bush burns unconsumed, and we, clay touched by God, will reach out for holiness and exclaim in wonder, how filled with awe is this place, and we did not know it. That is a little prayer that comes. Oh yeah, I want you have a vegetarian lasagna?
Eggplant. No.
Eggplant Parmesan.
All right.
Okay. Somebody handed that to me. I didn't write it. It's from a Reformed sitter. I am completely non-observant Jew. I only went to Sunday school for maybe 3 months, and I loved the Bible stories. And what I remember from Sunday school was dragging my baby sister in a basket. And I was Moses' daughter, and my baby sister was Moses. And my older sister was one of the Pharaoh's ladies or something. I don't know. And then I left Sunday school because nobody in my family believed in God. And my grandfather, who was a painter, had decreed that religion was the opiate of the masses. And so he was not a good communist. He was never a member of the party. But philosophically, he believed that religion was a way of the 1% keeping the rest of the people down. Okay, he was sort of the Bernie Sanders of portrait painters. And, but by the time he got old and sick, he was quoting Hebrew. This happens to people. God only knows why. I don't believe really in Hashem or a Jewish deity. I consider the orthodoxy of my tribe quite sexist. But I do believe in the force that through the green fuse feeds the flower. I do believe in a creative force in the universe, sometimes embodied in plants, sometimes embodied in fruits and vegetables, sometimes embodied in human beings. On my desk, I have Ganesha. On my desk, sort of like Freud's desk, I have Ganesha, I have Aphrodite, I have all the gods and goddesses that are meaningful to me. And Athena, meaningful to me because she represents wisdom. Ganesha because he represents new beginnings, and because his head was struck off by Zeus because he was arrogant, and Zeus plunked an elephant head on him, and he is now the god of new beginnings, the god of projects, the god of travel, and I feel very close to him. If I start a book, I have Ganesha on my desk. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I've been very interested in goddess worship throughout my life. I've written a book called Witches. I've met a lot of pagans, some silly pagans and some wise pagans. They're people, so they come in both varieties. There are silly ones and there are wise ones.
And the best ones are both.
What?
The best ones are both.
Silly, you're absolutely right, Naomi. Anyway, so I do believe there is a creative force in the universe, but I don't embody that creative force in a human being. I guess that would be the right way to tell you my religion. I used to have a friend, I dated a man who was a screenwriter in LA for a period when I was between marriages. And when he had to write down his religion, he would always say, room service. And I guess room service is also my religion. I like to stay in good hotels with very big bathtubs. What can I tell you? Okay, so here's where my book starts. Vanessa Wonderman is an actress of 60, and she stopped acting because the parts she gets offered are idiotic. They want her to play the grandma, the mother, or the old crone. She's 60 and she's beautiful, but in Hollywood she's unemployable unless she's willing to play the witch. So she stops working. I used to love the power I had over men. Walking down the street, my mandolin-shaped ass swinging and swaying to their backward eyes. How strange that I only completely knew this power when it was gone, or transferred to my daughter. All male eyes on her nubile 20-ish body, promising babies. I missed this power. It seemed that all the things that had come to replace it, marriage, maternity, the wisdom of the mature woman, ugh, I hate that phrase, weren't worth the candle. Ah, the candle. Standing up, burning for me, full of sound and fury, signifying everything. I know I should fade away like a good old girl and spare my daughter the embarrassments of my passions. But I can't any more than I can conveniently die. Life is passion. But now that I know what passion costs, it's hard to be carefree anymore. But was I ever carefree? Was anyone? Wasn't love always an exploding cigar? Didn't Gypsy Rose Lee say, God is love, but get it in writing? And didn't Fanny Bryce say, Love is a card trick. Once you know how it works, it's no fun anymore. Those old broads knew a thing or two. And did they ever give up? Never. I'm not going to tell you yet how old I am or how many times I've been married. I have decided not to get any older than 50. My husband and I read the obituaries together more often than we have sex. I am only going to say that when all the troubles of my family of origin engulfed me, and I realized that my marriage could not save me, I reached a point where I was just unhinged enough to put the following ad on a site called zipless.com, a sex site on the internet. Happily married woman with extra erotic energy seeks happily married man to share same. Come celebrate Eros one afternoon per week. Discretion guaranteed by a playful, pretty, witty, imaginative woman. Send email and recent picture. Talk about a woman on the verge of a nervous breakdown. It was autumn in New York, season of mellow mists, Jewish holidays, and $5,000 a plate benefits for chic diseases. A time of new beginnings, Yom Kippur, starting over, Rosh Hashanah, and laying in acorns against a barren winter, Sukkot. When I placed the ad, I had thought of myself as a sophisticate, coolly interviewing lovers. But now I was suddenly overcome with panic. I began fantasizing about what sort of creeps, losers, retreads, extortionists, and homicidal maniacs such an ad would attract. And then I was so busy with calls from my ailing parents and pregnant daughter that I forgot all about it. A few minutes went by. Then suddenly the responses poured out of the internet like coins out of a slot machine. I was almost afraid to look. After a couple of beats, I couldn't resist. It was like hoping I'd won the lottery. The first response showed a scanned Polaroid of an erect penis, a tawny, uncircumcised specimen with a drop of dew winking at the tip. Under the photo, on the white border, was scrawled, "Without Viagra." Okay. The accompanying email was concise. I like your style. Have always risen for assertive women. Send nude shot and measurements. The next one began like this. Dear seeker, sometimes we think it's carnality we want when actually we long for Jesus. We discover that if we open our hearts and let him in, him with a capital H, all sorts of satisfaction undreamt of can be ours. Perhaps you think you're seeking Eros, but Thanatos is what you really seek. In Jesus, there is eternal life. He is the lover who never disappoints, the friend who is loyal forever. It would be an honor to meet and counsel you. A telephone number was proffered, 1-800-JESUS for you. I threw all the responses in the virtual garbage can, deleted them, and shut down my computer. I must have been insane to give an authentic email address. That was the end of it, I thought. Absolutely. Another bad idea aborted. I went about my wife life like an automaton. I had always been impulsive, and impulsive people know how to back away from their impulses. Sex was trouble at any age. But by 60, oops, I gave it away. It was a joke. Women were not allowed to have passion at 60. We were supposed to become grandmothers and retreat into serene sexlessness. Sex was for 20, 30, 40, even 50. Sex at 60 was an embarrassment. Even if you still looked good, you just knew too much. You knew all the things that could go wrong, all the cons you could set yourself up for, the dangers of playing with strangers. You knew discretion was a dream. Besides, I adored my husband, and the last thing I wanted was to hurt him. I had always known that marrying someone 20 years older put me at risk for spending my sunset years without sex. But he had given me so much else. I'd married him when I was 45 and he was 65, and we'd had a great ride together. He had healed all the old wounds of my earlier marriages. He had been a great stepfather to my daughter. How dare I complain that something was missing in my life? How dare I advertise for Eros? And that's where it starts.
Okay.